These walls stretch higher than a 4-story building. 11,000 tons of granite, carved and stacked with mathematical precision. While London was a medieval swamp of open sewers and wooden huts, this African civilization was building curved walls so advanced, modern engineers still can't explain how they did it without blueprints. They had drainage systems, gold refineries, and a trading empire that stretched from China to Arabia. And when European colonizers discovered it, they spent 100 years lying about who built it. Today, Hidden Africa exposes the truth they tried to bury. The lost city that proves everything you were taught about ancient Africa was a lie. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly who was responsible. Nestled in the hills of southeastern Africa, roughly 200 miles south of the Zambezi River, lies the largest ancient stone structure south of the Sahara Desert, Great Zimbabwe. And no, the country was named after these ruins, not the other way around. In the Shona language, Zimbabwe means houses of stone. But these aren't just houses. Picture these. The year is 1200 AD. You're standing in a city of 18,000 people. Merchants from the Swahili coast have traveled 1,200 kilometers to trade in their bags. Chinese silk from the Song Dynasty, Persian glass beads, and Indonesian spices. And these aren't guesses. Archaeologists have found over 3,000 pieces of Chinese ceramics in these ruins. But the real treasure was gold. Great Zimbabwe controlled the gold trade for the entire southeastern African coast. At its peak, this empire was exporting over 1/3 of all the gold entering the medieval world market. To put that in perspective, King Solomon's legendary mines. Many historians now believe they were actually describing this region. See that tower? 33 feet tall, solid stone. No mortar, no scaffolding marks, no internal chambers. Modern architects have analyzed it for decades. The leading theory, it was an astronomical observatory, a grain silo designed to last millennia, or a sacred monument to the Shona religion, aligned perfectly with the rise of specific stars. But here's what makes Great Zimbabwe truly special. These walls were built using a technique called dry stone walling. No cement, no mortar, just carefully shaped granite blocks fitted together so precisely that you can't slide a credit card between them. The same technique used by the Incas at Machu Picchu, the same precision found in Egyptian pyramids. So when European explorers discovered Great Zimbabwe in the late 1800s, they had a problem. A very big problem. You see, the entire justification for colonizing Africa was built on one central lie: that Africans were primitive, incapable of civilization, and that Europeans were bringing progress to a dark continent. But Great Zimbabwe made that lie impossible. Here was undeniable, physical, architectural proof that advanced African civilizations existed long before Europeans arrived. So they did the only thing they could. They lied for over 100 years. In 1871, a German explorer named Karl Moch became one of the first Europeans to document Great Zimbabwe. In his journal, he wrote that the walls reminded him of, and I quote, the temple that Solomon built for the Queen of Sheba. Moch found a wooden lintel in one of the buildings. Ismail decided it smelled like his mother's cedar pencil case and concluded that it must be Lebanese cedar, imported by Phoenicians. The wood was later cut. It was local African sandalwood, cut in the 1300s from a tree that grows just 15 kilometers from the ruins. But Moch's theory stuck. For the next century, the official explanation went like this: Great Zimbabwe was built by Phoenicians, or Arabs, or Greeks, or a lost tribe of Israel, or ancient Egyptians, basically anyone except the people who actually lived there. And this wasn't just ignorant speculation, it was deliberate policy. Cecil Rhodes, the man who colonized 2 African countries and named them after himself, Rhodesia, funded expeditions to Great Zimbabwe with explicit instructions: Find evidence that Africans didn't build it. And if you couldn't find that evidence, create it. Over 40 major excavations were conducted between 1890 and 1950. Artifacts were removed by the thousands, many were lost. Others ended up in European museums, stripped of context and labeled as foreign imports. Then in 1929, something changed. A British archaeologist named Gertrude Katentamson was hired to settle the debate once and for all. Unlike the treasure hunters before her, Katentamson was a trained professional. She used modern archaeological methods: stratigraphy, comparative analysis, scientific dating. Her conclusion was unambiguous. Quote, "Examination of all existing evidence gives rise to the conviction that the buildings are unmistakably African in every detail." The colonial establishment was furious. Her findings were dismissed. She was accused of incompetence. But Gertrude Katentamson stood by her work. She was right. Everyone else was lying. And she knew it. But the lies continued for another 50 years. Now, you might be thinking, if the truth was known in 1929, why did the lies continue? Here's where it gets even darker. The Rhodesian government didn't just ignore the evidence. They made it illegal to tell the truth. I'm not exaggerating. Archaeological reports were censored. Historians were fired for publishing accurate findings. The Rhodesian government passed actual laws controlling what could be said about Great Zimbabwe, but in a moment, I'm going to show you the evidence they couldn't destroy. The artifacts that prove not just who built Great Zimbabwe, but how they did it, and why this civilization might have been even more advanced than we thought. Stay with me. This gets incredible. In 1980, Zimbabwe gains independence. The country is renamed after its greatest ancient monument. And finally, African archaeologists can study their own history. For the past 40 years, teams of African researchers have uncovered what colonial archaeologists either missed or deliberately buried. And what they found changes everything. First, Great Zimbabwe wasn't just built on gold. It was built on iron. The builders had mastered iron smelting at least 300 years before the first Europeans arrived. Their furnaces reached temperatures over 1,200 degrees Celsius, hot enough to produce carbon steel. This was metallurgy on par with anything in medieval Europe, and they used it to transform their agriculture. Iron hoes could break tough African soil that wooden tools couldn't touch, allowing them to build terraced farming systems across the surrounding hills. A sustainable agriculture that fed a city of nearly 20,000 people. Second, remember that drainage I mentioned? The Great Enclosure contains a sophisticated water management system built directly into the walls. Channels carved into the stone direct rainwater away from the foundations. This was civil engineering, planned centuries in advance. And it's the reason these walls are still standing after 800 years of tropical rains. Third, let me show you the most controversial discovery of all. The Zimbabwe birds, 8 carved soapstone sculptures, each about 16 inches tall, standing on pillars. Today, this bird is on Zimbabwe's flag, their currency, their coat of arms. But what did they represent? Some researchers believe they represented the Shona concept of ancestors, spiritual messengers between the living and the dead. Others have noted that the birds were positioned at specific points in the complex, aligned with astronomical events, like the rising of certain stars or the sun, like Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids. Great Zimbabwe may have been an astronomical observatory disguised as a city, but here's what they don't tell you in history books. During the colonial period, 6 of the 8 birds were stolen. Cecil Rhodes personally kept one in his house, like a trophy. Others ended up scattered across Europe. After independence, Zimbabwe spent decades negotiating their return. The last bird was only returned in 2003, over a century after it was stolen. But perhaps the most important revelation is this. Researchers have found coins from the Ming Dynasty, porcelain from the Song Dynasty, and glass beads traced to workshops in India. Great Zimbabwe wasn't isolated. It was the capital of a trading empire that connected directly to the Indian Ocean trade network. Through the port of Sofala, 1,000 kilometers away, Great Zimbabwe's gold reached markets in Arabia, India, and China. Marco Polo wrote about African gold flooding into Asian markets. He was describing this gold from this civilization. At its peak, Great Zimbabwe's trading network was larger than most European kingdoms of the same era. So here's the question that should keep you up at night. If they lied about Great Zimbabwe for 100 years, what else have they lied about? Because Great Zimbabwe isn't alone. There are over 200 similar stone structures scattered across southern Africa. Kami ruins, Dolodlo, Nalatil. Most have never been properly excavated. Many have been looted. We're only now beginning to understand what was lost. But here's why this matters now. For the first time, African researchers are leading the excavation of African history using technology that colonial archaeologists couldn't have dreamed of. LIDAR scanning is revealing hidden structures beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar is mapping complexes we didn't know existed. In the next decade, we're going to discover more about ancient Africa than in the previous 2 centuries combined. And this isn't just archaeology. Great Zimbabwe now attracts over 100,000 visitors per year. A UNESCO World Heritage Site driving economic development for the entire region. The same history that colonizers tried to erase is now generating millions in tourism revenue. For the African diaspora, it's something more undeniable, carved-in-stone proof of what their ancestors achieved. The lie was simple. Africa had no history worth remembering. But these walls tell a different story, a story of engineers, astronomers, traders, artists, and kings. A story they tried to bury and failed. Great Zimbabwe stood for 400 years, a capital of commerce, spirituality, and innovation. Then it was abandoned, and for 100 years after that, lies built walls around its truth. But lies don't last. Stone does. 11,000 tons of granite, built without mortar by Africans. But Great Zimbabwe's story raises another question. Why was it abandoned? A city of 18,000 people vanished? No invasion, no recorded disaster, no explanation. In our next video, we investigate the theories. Climate change, civil war, economic collapse, and the new evidence that suggests the truth might be stranger than any of them. If you want to discover what Hidden Africa uncovers next, you know what to do. We're just getting started.